Thank you.
That's good. Well, as Mr. Muhammad said, my name is Abdul Rahim, and I will be your moderator tonight. On the panel, we have Mr. Ken Hicks. He is an author, a licensed psychotherapist, a clinical social worker, and a certified domestic violence counselor. We also have, she's not on right now, but we have Ms. Sharon Moncrief. She's an executive director for the Women of Refined Gold Incorporated. We have Ms. Shalonda Curley of the YMCA of Baden-Royal. And we also have Mentor, the author, CEO, and director of Advocate Against Childhood Domestic Violence. So, as you all know, tonight we're going to be talking about domestic violence. We all know that domestic violence is something that is still rampant within the African American community amongst both males and females. And it's not just an issue that is solely attributed to adults, it also affects children. So I think that it's something that we need to talk about because it's a pandemic within our community, so to speak. And I'm just going to give a few statistics from the domestic violence statistics board. So every 9 seconds in the United States, a woman is beaten or assaulted. Around the world, at least 1 in every 3 women is beaten, coerced, or otherwise abused in their lifetime. And mostly, it comes at the hand of a loved one or family member. Nearly 1 in 5 teenage girls have been in a relationship with a boyfriend who has threatened them with violence or with self-harm if they try to leave. And domestic violence victims lose nearly 8 million days of paid work per year in the United States alone. So it also affects us financially. So, like I said, I think it's something that we need to talk about, and I'm here to let you guys have that discourse. So, the first question that we have is, what exactly is domestic violence? We can start with Mr. Hicks.
Okay. Domestic violence. All right. 1 second. Domestic violence, what is it? Okay, I know a lot of people have different terms for it. Abuse committed against a spouse, former cohabitant, or person with whom the victim has had a child, or is having had a child, or has a dating relationship. Other terms used, intimate partner violence. Kind of a broad thing as far as what domestic violence is.
Okay.
Maybe the ladies have something to say on that.
So for a lot of the times that I give the example of what is domestic violence, I think the most notable term is it's more than a black eye. Most people think that domestic violence is just physical, but it also expands to the isolation and also leads basically rooted in power and control. So you have the spiritual abuse, you have digital abuse, physical, you have threats, emotional, mental, you have all these various components in it, but with the root of it being at the power control. So I don't know if most people have seen the power control wheel, but instead of most people feel like the textbook version of it, like, oh, that doesn't apply to me. But I would encourage you to look at the power control wheel to specifically see those examples and how domestic violence is played out, because it's a lot more common than it is talked about. And a lot of times most people are looking at the physical ramifications versus the emotional, the gaslighting that goes on, the financial, spiritual, and emotional components of it. And I'll let my sister also add as well.
And that That pretty much is what I was going to say about the power and control wheel. I think you said everything on that. Also, with the isolation, we're talking about minimizing, blaming, denying when there's issues, using emotional abuse, using sexual abuse, using the children, coercion and threats, things in that nature, using economic abuse. So these are all the things that also using male privilege. These are also all things that are in the power and control wheel of abuse. And there's so many other things. I think I like that you said digital abuse, which I've never really thought about that, but that is a big thing with social media because now, even just thinking on simple terms, if you have a picture of me where I was exposed and you now want to expose that and put that on social media, then you can control me because then why I'm going to, combat that, or say something to you when I know you can expose me to my family, to other people. So there's a lot of different ways of abuse. And domestic violence can be very broad. It's not a simple thing. And, I always like to talk where people can really understand. And it's not just one thing. It can be many things within the relationship. And I pass it back to you.
I wonder if I could ask tell what emotional abuse is, because a lot of people really don't know what that is as far as emotional abuse. And the receiver, number one, is the one who decides the abuse, not the one who performs or executes the act. So we got emotional abuse as insults, blowing money on drugs, alcohol, coming home drunk or high, intense jealousy, manipulating with lies, accuses her of affairs, nonviolent threats. The batterer abuses does not want her to keep a job, stops her from, and this could be men or women, stops the person from going to school or to work, laughs all the time, laughs at the person all the time, ignores the person, makes her think she or he is crazy, deprives her of any physical needs, food, sleep, decent place to live. Those are kind of emotional abusive things that kind of affect a lot of people that really don't know what emotional abuse is, and that affects the person a lot. Yes.
And to add on to that, as we're talking about, we're basically dealing with multiple pandemics right now between COVID, between domestic violence, and even the racism. When you look at how domestic violence is played out to within COVID, this is what he just said. It looks like you can't go out and go get the essential needs that you have. You can't talk to your family and friends. All of a sudden, you're isolated because they are in every part of your conversation. That adds to that. They threaten to keep you out, withhold medicine from you, give you the virus, throw objects, punch holes in the walls, unwanted sex, not respecting your boundaries. And what she also talked about digital is give me your phone, send me your passwords. I want to see who you went. I want to put a tracking device on you. All of those is what is exacerbated now that we have COVID-19 going on as well.
Okay.
I wanted to add a few more statistics. Okay. Statistics indicate that same-sex relationships have the same frequency as domestic violence as opposite-sex relationships. Over 1,400 women die of domestic violence every year. 3 to 4 women die of domestic violence by their husbands, boyfriends, or partners each day. A woman is battered every 9 seconds. Over 400 men die of domestic violence each year. 92% of domestic violence assailants reported using drugs or alcohol on the day of the assault. 75% of women who are killed by their boyfriends, husbands in a relationship are murdered when they attempt to leave or after they have left. In domestic violence homicides, women are 6 times more likely to be killed when there's a gun in the house. 52% of men have guns. 43% of women have guns. 60% of battered women are beaten when they are pregnant. Women victimized by abuse are at a substantially increased risk of losing at least one pregnancy. Murder is the unlawful killing of a human being and or a fetus or embryo at any time of pregnancy during an assault on a pregnant woman. Domestic violence is the #1 cause of emergency visits by women to the hospital.
Wow.
I know that's heavy. Sorry.
No, it's okay because like a lot of people don't really have they have a false perception of domestic violence, and because of that, there's like a lot of things that go on as domestic violence that aren't reported as domestic violence. You know what I mean? So that's good that you were able to bring up those statistics.
Thank you.
So, is domestic violence, is it a learned behavior, or like how does it originate within a person?
I definitely feel that it's a learned behavior. I grew up in a home with domestic violence. So for me, a lot of my focus has also been on childhood domestic violence, which is any child that grows up experiencing or being in the environment of that environmental trauma of growing up in the homes, and where there's 15 million kids in the US that are growing up in this right now, and 1 billion globally, and 40 million adults that grew up in these homes. And so when you look back at, well, why did my dad abuse my mom? It goes back to, well, my grandfather did it. And so you have these generational cycles and these generational curses that also leads to systematic as well, that set up to have these added pressures on it, where this is how, when dad's mad, he lets his frustration out. This is how dad controls and this is how, we keep this cycle going, because no one uproots it. No one talks to the child about it, because a lot of what happens here stays here, and that manifests within us these rooted traumas, which now, as you see, more women are the offenders as well, because the women are, I don't want to be what my mom was, so I'm going to take on that approach. And I went through, as a child growing up in this home, I went through all these stages. So I went through the stage of being in a domestic violence relationship because I didn't know that it was more than a black eye. And then it got to, well, I'm not going to be my mother. So now I'm being, maybe this is why my father is doing this. You know what I'm saying? So it absolutely learned behavior, because what you see and what's not challenged continues to fester and grow and perpetuate unless you are shown a better way.
Okay.
Some of the other research on that, and it says that children are in the same room or adjacent room in 90% of incidents of domestic violence. Children imitate what they see the parents do, and they grow up and usually do the same thing.
You either have the kids doing the exact same thing, or you have the ones that internally try to, like, they take into themselves, but then go into acting out in other ways to self-soothe that pain. So you're absolutely correct.
Okay.
And I think abuse in any form or violence in any form, which we see the kind of America we live in that's completely violent. I believe in any form, it doesn't have to be necessarily I saw domestic violence in my home, but I saw violence in my home. I was abused by a parent. I was abused, and bullied in school. And so now, even though that can say that's not learned behavior of domestic violence per se, but it's learned behavior of violence and trauma. Agreed. And so now when I get into a relationship, I'm connecting back with that trauma and that abuse. So when we talk about learned behavior, it's not just seeing domestic violence in the home, it's also looking at it from a view of violence, the way we have violence all over in America. The way we have been actually subjected to violence so much that it's become part of who we are as a people. We've all been traumatized in some way because of violence. So I think it's not just in the home of seeing a father abuse a mother or a mother abuse a father. It's also seeing in the outside community and the things that happen to you when you're outside the home, as well as in the home with maybe one parent.
Okay. Most definitely. And to add to your point too, it's essentially it's normalized dysfunction, right? Like it's normalized dysfunction. I had a conversation with a 15-year-old girl who mentioned, oh, I thought this was normal because all of my friends' parents, they fight. That's what our culture does. We cuss and we fight. That's how we lay them hands. And then our music and our movies also amplify that as well. So I'm so glad you hit that on the nose, because it is. When we listen to our music, how many? I'm a Ike and Tina. I'm a Ike Turner. You like we take these movies and we put jokes to the oppression and to the abuse of what is happening, which normalizes it. Which when you see a woman slapping a dude because she's mad, or a guy slapping a woman because he's mad, or get back in place, and that is glorified. So that adds to that, which is training generation who doesn't know, like this is the way, which it's not.
Right.
I wanted to add something, and I had mentioned earlier, the receiver is the one that decides the abuse, not the person that that puts the abuse on or does it. Because a lot of times people are growing up in a family and they feel as though that's how it is, that's fine. And so a guy might just hit a girl, and she might, or a woman, and he might say, I didn't hurt you that much. The receiver decides the abuse, not the perpetrator, the receiver.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's both though, because in some instances, yes, but in some instances that they know what they're doing and they would challenge you 1000% on what that is.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely.
I remember incidents where my mom would call my grandmother about the abuse and was just told, you just need to be a better wife. You need to quit making him mad. And so I saw a comment from one of our viewers that said our church needs to address it. You're absolutely correct. I am, by the way, a preacher's kid. My father's a preacher. And the church basically told my mom, God hates divorce, go back to him. The church has sent women back into these situations and have overlooked it for so many years that also teaches another generation that if I'm going through this, God wants me to go through this. God is testing me. He's putting my faith that I have to push through this when that's not the case. So it's a whole lot of misappropriated and incorrect learnings that have to be uprooted, especially in our communities of color, because we cling to our faith, we lean on our faith. And if our leaders are not trained on the proper response and they're not trained on the correct theology of the word, you just continue to perpetuate that.
Right.
So one more comment. As far as when I was growing up, my mother never used to curse or anything like that. So I never cursed and everything. Living across the street from cousins and everything, his mom used to curse a whole lot. So he was used to that. So he cursed a whole lot. I think it's abusive because I never grew up with it. And when people curse, it's kind of abusive to me. You might say, wow, that's abusive. You never heard that before? I didn't grow up with it. My mother didn't curse, so neither do I.
Right. So do you guys think that it's like an issue that's more prevalent in certain culture, or is it just like distinct to the Black community?
I feel like it definitely is prevalent to certain cultures than others, but I feel like domestic violence is equal in race, sex, class, socioeconomic, all of that, but definitely in the African American community, in Native American, Asian Pacific. You also have it in even in the white communities, because quite frankly, now you got privilege on your side. A lot of your lawyers, your judges, your police officers are doing the abuse right there. But in our communities as well, you take like what we're dealing with right now with the racial inequality, where we can't call the cops, really. Like, we can call the cops, but now there's that fear, and now there's that gaslighting. Well, if you call the cops, you want me to be dead. You know what I mean? You want the abuse to stop, but do you want the dude or the girl to go to be killed? Because now you don't know. So you have all these extra layer components on there, where now, because we have all these complexities, our minority and communities of color, we are more liable to keep it under the table and brush it under the rug, which allows it to continue because we don't have that systematic support behind us.
I agree.
And many times I call it the code of family silence. A lot of things that go on in the home is silent. Nobody wants to talk about it. So the kids that grow up and become teenagers or whatever, that's passed on to be the code of dating silence. So it continues and continues to people who don't want to talk about it. But some of the statistics say that, the Black culture is the ones that lead in getting arrested and things like that. Then comes the Hispanic, then comes the white, stuff like that. So they have different statistics on it. But a lot of times the code of family silence is kept inside. Nobody wants to talk about it. But they're talking about it more because it happens and happens again.
Yes. And if you, were you going to speak?
No.
If you're in the Black community, one of the things that is always said, you better not tell my business in my house.
Right.
You better not tell our business. I better not hear you talking about anything that goes on in this house. So when you hear that as a child, why would you want to? I mean, that's a threat. Why would you want to go out and tell anybody your business? Some of that also comes from, because if you do talk about it, we don't know what kind of systems may come into our house and destroy our household. So there's many things that are contributing to why I'm speaking the code of silence in the African-American home, including that way back from slavery time, the Black woman has always been like the one who has to protect the family. These things are not happening by coincidence. I know a lot of times people are like, don't bring slavery up. Why you gotta bring slavery up? But it's the truth. If I, just like what's happening today, if I know, just like Tiffany touched on, if I call the police come to my house, they don't arrest him, but now he's dead. Look at all that guilt I have on me as an African-American female. Right. Not only was I being abused and victimized, but now here by the system that I called to help me has now done the same thing.
Right.
So it's a reason why we have the code of silence, because we're talking about the 70s now. If you told that the man was even in the home, you couldn't get welfare. Right. So you couldn't get certain things from this system in order to function as a family, because it was always built. And again, I have to go back to slavery, for us not to be a family, for us not to be a unit. So it's not only me against my abuser in the home, but it's also, what is this system going to do to me once I let them into my home? Okay. That's where don't tell your business comes from.
And I had another comment. These days, a lot of states, you can't spank your child. You spank your child and the child goes to school and show a scar. The teacher has to report violence or abuse to the child. So nowadays, you can have your kids taken away if you're doing that. Absolutely. So, when I was growing up, I used to get spanked with the belt, and my father used to take a switch off. A lot of new school folks don't know what a switch is. That's kind of a small branch. My father used to say, go out there and get me a switch. And if you don't get a big one, I'll go out and get a tree and spank you. But these days, you can't spank your kids and somebody else know about it. They're going to call the Child Protective Services, and they might come out, and that's always going to be on your record. Always going to be on your record. So yes.
And to add to your point, though, it's like the parents have to worry about that, and they can go up in arms about that. But where are we going up in arms about when a woman is abused or when a man is abused? Like, where can we get because domestic violence is a crime on top of that. Like, it's not just here's a definition, it is a crime. And if parents can't discipline their children, then why aren't those who are consistently abusing their significant others, why isn't that being? You get more outcry over a dog treatment than a woman being abused, than man being abused. When a woman or someone is being abused, it is, what did you do? Or what? Why don't you just leave? It must not be that bad. You stayed all this time. Like, it goes to the victim blame shifting, but there's so many other areas and so many other pockets of, well, if you do this, it's instant, it's on your head. But we need to have that same energy in our community around not turning a blind eye to domestic violence and making it a home issue, because it's not just a home issue. It stems into our communities. It stems into our schools, our churches. Lives are being impacted by what happens behind those homes, behind those closed doors.
Right. Well, a lot of times you might, have a victim, and you might have a friend that's a victim, and you keep asking them, why are you still staying there? He's still doing that. Then they won't talk to you anymore, because they feel as though every time they talk to you, you're making them leave or whatever, and they're not ready to leave yet. It takes time before they get their self-esteem up, they feel comfortable, and they can leave.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not, you cannot be.
They won't say anything to you anymore. And you're wondering, why don't she talk to me anymore? Because you keep bringing that up. As being a friend or relative, you just have to be available when they want you to be available. And you can provide them with resources and everything else. But they have to decide when it's time to leave, not you.
You just got to listen. Be a safe space for them. Don't interrogate them.
And speaking of listening, I want to go backwards a little bit, because again, another thing that's taught in our culture as African Americans, especially for women, is to be a strong Black woman, to not let anybody beat you down. So when you abuse me and the cops show up, we both probably have bruises on our, if not anything else, you got a couple scratches on your face. Because I did fight back, because even with the violence that I grew up with, I was always taught, fight back, be strong. And so when the police come, and with the system that we have now, with police not being educated on trauma or abuse, you come and then you see both of us in scratches, and you scratching your head like, who's the victim?
Right.
And then because African-American women are already looked at as aggressive and strong, so we're not the only culture that see us as strong Black women. And then they come and they say things like, you let him abuse you. Look how big you are. Look, you look like you shouldn't be, he should have done this to you, those type of things. So, we're, and there's a whole nother thing on that about Black women dying in the hospital. And I want to say this after giving childbirth. And some of the reasons why is because the way that we endure pain. So if a doctor comes and say, what kind of pain are you having on a scale of 1 to 10? And I calmly say a 10. Why are you so calm? Why are you not screaming like other cultures? Because I'm strong and I've been taught to endure pain in this way. So just because I don't look like I'm suffering and I'm going through pain, it doesn't mean that that's not happening.
And to add to that as well, even in some states, based on what the laws are, if they come and they see both of you guys with scratches on, they're taking you both to jail as well. So now you have a whole nother layer of, I could also go to jail, though I was defending myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say nothing.
Right.
And I think now when the police come out, they're usually going to arrest somebody, and if they can't tell who the aggressor is, both people will go to jail, because if they just say, okay, go, just don't come back for a while till you cool down and something happens, that police department can be sued. They don't want to be sued, so somebody usually going to jail these days, either one person or both people, if they can't decide.
Okay. And depending on who it is, it's, do you have privilege? Because they can use that and be, well, I'm gonna take you because he's an upstanding person in the community, or has this title, and he couldn't do that, because that's a whole nother layer on even on the back end of it. Once you get out the divorce, you got the court system that you're dealing with too. Now you're worried if you're going to keep your kids or you're going to lose your kids. Is he going to pay? Is he going to put a book picture? My father wore a preacher collar to court during my parents' divorce. And the court looked at him in such a great light as opposed to my mother, where my mother barely got anything from the divorce. And it was like she was re-victimized in that courtroom. So when you add to different cultures and the systematic levels of why domestic violence is high and why it stays a secret, you see it all. It's like an onion. You're pulling back all these layers that need to be fixed and need to be addressed.
That's a very interesting way of looking at it. So what are some of the responses to domestic violence?
Well, one of the responses these days, many women are now being arrested for domestic violence. Because the police and courts are not protecting them enough, an increased number of women being killed by their boyfriends or partners. A lot of women are now taking self-defense, and they're having their kids learn self-defense. And so a lot of men are, being abused a lot. When I'm doing my groups and everything, I have some of the women say, nobody's putting their hands on me anymore. Absolutely not. And they become a lot of times the abuser and won't let anybody, put their hands on them again, but they're the ones in control.
Yeah, if you're not able to call the police in terms of responding to it, if someone does open up to you, the best way to respond is by being educated and being aware on what it is, what it looks like, and what resources are available. And then from there, when it comes to the responses, is knowing what your state coalitions are, what are your grassroots organizations, what are the advocacies that are there for you or for whoever you may know that's going through it. Be a bucket of information. Like, this is save it, bookmark it, because it is happening and it's much more prevalent. And as we've seen with domestic violence rising up to 30% in some states and decreasing as low as 16% in other cases, you got one extreme, the calls are going up, you got another extreme, the calls are going down, because it is just COVID-19 has just exasperated it. The last place that these victims wanted to be in is trapped in a situation with their offender. So being a safe space and being educated and being aware of the resources that are there, but making sure that your presence and listening is most important. How can you help them? A lot of times, majority of these relationships are rooted in financial, where you feel stuck and can't. My mother was married to my father for 30 years, never worked. That was a huge component of why she didn't leave. She left 7 to 8 different times, but always had to go back because financially she just couldn't provide for her children. So what financial institutions or what ways you can help them with where they can feel independent, that you can get them connected, to me are the responses of equipping. So education, awareness, and equipping them to feel safe and to be independent, not telling them what they need to do. They're already being controlled as it is. So allow them that power, allow them that grace to be a safe space for them is what I would say for a response.
Mm-hmm. And we also say awareness is the key to prevention and intervention. Yeah. Just knowing the kind of stuff. So, it's schooling high school kids and teens and things like that, just prevention. So they know when something like that comes up, hey, I need to get some help. Or this is what's happening. Or maybe I can talk to somebody about it. So awareness is the key to prevention and intervention. If it does happen, what you can do.
But how do we go about making people aware that don't necessarily want to be aware? Because it happens, like some people know about it, especially like within my generation. A lot of people, they know about it, but it's like they're cool with the people who might be offenders, or, so they don't necessarily want to talk about it.
I don't feel you force it, but I feel like you make it relatable enough to make them feel it. So when you think about marketing, it's about storytelling. It's about being able to bring, if they don't agree with the textbook definition, how can this relate? Like, like when you take movies, right? When you look at Prince, okay? Prince, if we pay attention to Purple Rain, you got all these movies, all right, that show domestic violence right in our face that we just don't even talk about. But if you take Prince and you see how he witnessed his father abusing his mother, and then a couple scenes later went and slapped his old girl right after it, it's like, it's not normal. And you can consistently be that voice without compromising that, by no matter if they agree to it or not. If you stick up and say it's wrong, if you continue to post and say that you're a voice, that you take a stand, that this isn't right, it's the same things we're doing with what's happening right now with the racial tensions and the injustices. It takes a voice, and a consistent voice, to take their platform and say, I am going to be the change. I know that it's not right. You may not think it's right, but I'm going to keep posting. I'm going to keep drawing awareness, so that you never know who this might touch, who this might impact. And you may have to come back to my page later on in life and books, let me save that post because they posted these tips or they posted that. But at least they know. They never have to agree, but at least you know my stance, and at least you know that when you come around me with it, I'm not joking about it, I'm not laughing about it. It takes the person who knows that it's not right to just be that voice, and you don't have to badger them down with your opinion. But if it's you on your platform showing, this is where you are, and this is where I stand, and I'm zero tolerance for it.
Okay.
I'd like to make a comment. These days, the movies, the TV, everything is violent. Everything is violent. Matter of fact, that ranks number 1 on the TV scale, and on the movie scale is violence. They're constantly fighting. Everything is fighting constantly. So a lot of times, when I was dealing with young kids, they like different sports and everything. Before they start playing, we do something on dating violence. We do something on resources and things. So at least it kind of hits there, because if you just bring it up, who out here would like to hear about that? Nobody wants to hear about it. When I go to colleges and doing domestic dating violence prevention things, a lot of people don't want to hear about it, because a lot of them have already been through it. They don't want to hear it again. But I'm just saying, they had to be there, so I'm talking about it. Yes, absolutely. And that's what we have to do. We have to spread the word. I know some people don't want to hear about it, but hey, listen, later on in life, they might say, I'm glad somebody told me.
Right.
I agree.
And earlier when you were introducing me, you said the YMCA, but it is the YWCA. And our number is 937-222-SAFE, which is always definitely a resource when it comes to talking about domestic violence. We have shelter, we do housing, we do so many different things at the YWCA. But I agree with Mr. Hicks as well as Tiffany about education and educating people at a young age. Because that's where it starts, not knowing, being ignorant, and what we're doing now, talking about it, not making it a code of silence anymore, just like racism, just like the things that are going on in this country right now. People have not taken the challenge to protest, because you can protest in many ways. It does not just have to be that I went downtown and I marched with everybody. It could be that I put a sign in my yard to say no more domestic violence. When I'm driving and I see a car and they have the children decal on the back of the car, I'm always looking like, oh, mother, father, 3 kids. I see people with the, what you call the license plates, when they have the personalized license plates.
The vanity plates.
Vanity plates. So I'm always reading those, but I never see anything about stop domestic violence, or I never see anything about stop racism, or I mean, every once in a while, and then you might see a person like that has many stickers over their car, so you can't really focus, on one thing. But these are the ways in which we can protest, because talking about it, educating people about it, these are all the things that are needed in our culture, in our country. And I wanted to read something from Jane Elliott that I had just saw last night, because she said that an educator is from the duck deuce, meaning lead, the prefix E, meaning out, the suffix ate, meaning act of, and the suffix or, meaning one who does. So when you educate someone, it's one who can lead a person who has been ignorant and engage them in doing something different. Okay. So that's that's what we need to take time out to do, to educate people, to talk to people, to do things like we're doing right now, to use platforms so that a person who may, am I getting emotionally abused? I don't even know. But because I heard this and I heard someone speaking of their example, now I see this is the truth. I am getting emotionally abused, and I need to get out of this relationship.
Okay.
Yeah, and a couple of things that you guys touched on I want to hit real quick is domestic violence is an inconvenient truth. Just because we ignore tough issues doesn't mean they go away. The more we delay having the conversation, the more people are suffering in silence. Same thing with racism right now. And one of the things that you said about the culture, like we haven't, that it just continues perpetual, right? But we also need to get healing from it too. June is PTSD Awareness Month. With domestic violence, it's also PTSD. So when you talk about the TV, everything is violence, there are triggers. If you never gotten healed from it, you're still being triggered by it. I still have PTSD I overcome today. And thankfully, I've done a lot of the work through counseling. But that's another thing that we as an African-American community and communities of color have not really embraced is, oh, you crazy if you talk to somebody. But also because don't tell my business, what happens here stays here. That is a bondage where I can't really go to a counselor because I'm telling business, because my loyalty to the family. Now I can't get free and get that trauma-informed healing that I need. So then you just have the cycle continue. And as you talk about you say you do teen dating violence. That is how our teenagers, teen dating violence is on the rise as well, because our teenagers think dysfunctional love is love. Like, yeah, he's controlling, that's love. Yeah, he mad, that's love. He loved me. No, she popping up, calling me 20 times in a row. That is not love. And that is the conversations that we need to continue to drive and continue to put out in front of our culture to say, this is not okay. This is not love. You are worthy of more than this, and you can have this. And just because you grew up in these homes doesn't mean you are going to have that.
Some of the stickers that people have on their cars, as far as letting people know that they have children and everything. They got to be kind of cautious about that because you got a lot of kidnappers out there. They like see a sign that says, you know, kids and everything else, and they'll start following, or see you might run into the store and leave the kids in the car. So you got to be real careful about that.
Right. But I was saying in words of domestic violence, like putting in place of those, because that is telling your business, but in place of those, putting something about, you know, I am against domestic violence. Just bringing awareness to what I was talking about.
And I totally got what you were saying, Shalonda. It's basically breast cancer has ribbons. Where's the domestic violence ribbon? Mirror the same exact mark, and it's not to take away from breast cancer because it is equally as important as well. But the same, can we get the same amount of awareness across the board for all these injustices? And that is why we are screaming out right now to be heard of, even about Black Lives Matter.
Right. Purple is the color for domestic violence. During October is Domestic Violence Month. So we do place ribbons as a YWCA throughout the downtown city area. But I agree with you 100%, Tiffany, that it is not on the platform like breast cancer, and it should be. Yeah. And I want to say something else about our culture. You brought this up earlier, Tiffany, and I really, because we have, when we look at domestic violence in America, we look at Ike and Tina, Chris Brown and Rihanna, Ray Rice and his wife, I don't know her name. Mm-hmm. But on the same line of how police have gotten away, do you see how Black men have gotten away with committing domestic violence and not being charged on the scale of a celebrity? And how
celebrity,
yeah. And so it looks as if this behavior is okay. The same way of people dying in the streets from police brutality. It's sending the message that this is okay behavior and we accept it, especially when we put it in a song like Eat the Cake, anime, Eat the Cake. So, you know, that's super cute because I'm forcing you to do something. But if I'm dancing to it and if I'm feeling like it's a normal thing, which a large part of America has felt as if this is normal, that people are dying at the hands of police brutality. You know, this is crazy. This is something that needs to stop. Mm-hmm. People need to be arrested. You should not be able to hit me in an elevator where everybody can see and knock me out cold, unconscious for minutes before I come to. Whether I protect you or not, at the end of that, I saw you do that. And yet I did not get arrested. Yet I got a couple games off where, you know, I couldn't play. That's crazy to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Eve, it's like Eve has a song I wish would come back out. Love is Blind. I heard that in high school. It was like, is anybody else? Everybody looked at me crazy when she went through her friend who was murdered by domestic violence behind that. And she went through that cycle and what that looks like and how you did this. And the thing is, like you said, like, and I'm in Arizona. So Arizona has paint Arizona purple during the month of October, which is huge because I'm originally from Michigan and we ain't had it. So Home Depot gives you purple light bulbs to put on your porch. The Capitol lights up purple during that month. You have all these initiatives and that's cool. But can we keep that going through outside of October? Can we keep that awareness? And if your state doesn't have it, these are some of the things that we need to start doing. How can we get this to be aware on a state level, a state response to draw these resources and get the community what they need?
Okay. Before we proceed with our discussion, I would like to make a short announcement. If you are feeling generous, you can support Knowledge for Life by donating at www.knowforlife.org. That's www.know4life.org. And there you will be also asked to join our Patreon site. So, back to our discussion. You talked about, Ms. Mincy, you spoke about the cycle of domestic violence. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more?
So the cycle of, I talked on a couple of different ones. Which cycle of it continuing to fester, or when you're in it, or the generational one or all?
Talk about the generational one, because like I said, I see it as an issue that's it's very well, as far as like transitioning to like different generations or newer generation, with like everything that's happening with the pandemic, and then like, you know, people not having access to resources because they already don't know about these things.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's becoming more prevalent.
Yeah. So I mean, when you look at the cycle of it, again, from my experience and even from my research, your environment shapes a lot of what you become, who you become, and what you do. And so for me, when I talk about the life cycle for childhood domestic violence, the first time that I saw the abuse, I was 7 years old. And it continued until I was 17 when my mother said, "You're graduating high school. I can't do it anymore. Either he's going to kill me or I'm going to kill him." And from there, it was my father thought what he saw growing up was normal. My father thought, and so as he's getting pushback, and when my mom would leave, my grandmother never left. What is this? Like, why am I being challenged? And I'm gonna do better. I'm gonna do better. I'm sorry. I'm gonna make up for it. I'm gonna give you all these gifts. I'm gonna give you these new cars. You're good. Things will get better for a moment. It rises up again, and it gets worse, and it continues to get worse. She leave. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna do it again. I promise I'm gonna get better. I'm gonna get help. Not get help. Come back. Not get help. It get worse, and that cycle continues. Now, as a child in this, I feel helpless. I feel guilty. I can't do anything for my mom. What do? I try to get help. I'm shushed back in the room. So now I'm sitting here and I'm festering. Like, maybe it's my fault. Mom's going to be mad at me because I can't help her. And now you have all these weight and guilt, this helplessness, hopelessness. Then as you're leaving, because we would leave, and as we would leave, we would stay, because in the early 90s, advocacy, domestic violence agencies weren't really like hot topic. You couldn't really go to them. So you went to family and friends' homes to seek shelter and haven. And while going there, the mother, my mother's friend, they were so empathetic to her. They were not empathetic to me. It was like, you're plus one. So now, outside of when my mom wasn't around, they're treating me bad. I'm trying to tell my mom can't even hear that because she's trying to survive. So as the kid, now you feel forgotten, hopeless, abandoned. And then that's what I wrote about in my book, is my journey on what that looked like from a kid. This is how this looked, that life cycle of my mom and dad's drama outshadows me. I'm not important. So now as I'm getting older and I'm a teenager, hey, my influences are bigger now because I'm in high school. I want to hear what they're talking about. Oh, they're dabbling in relationships. Let me get a boyfriend. That'll help me escape what's happening here. Oh, I should be having sex at this age. Oh, okay. Anything to just escape. I don't really like sex. Oh, it'll get better. Just keep doing it. Oh, okay. Because I'm just trying to escape the madness at my house. I don't want to be there, so I'm hanging out. My friends are my covers. So now I'm dealing with these boys, the star basketball player, girls are giving attention. Now I'm jealous at this. You must like her. All the things that I'm seeing my father do to my mom. Now I feel that way to these chicks that's trying to talk to my star basketball player at the high school. Maybe my father has a point. Maybe this is how you act. You see how the cycle continues. So now, as I'm continuing down this situation, now we get into college, but now drugs are being introduced to the picture. And okay, I'm trying to heal. I'm trying to self-medicate. Nope, this isn't working. I almost get raped. I'm now in an abusive relationship. High school sweetheart turns abusive. Never saw that coming, but I'm doing good because I'm fighting back. You get these hands. Wait, no, but I don't like this feeling. Like, this can't be what love is. I can't be getting dragged from the cafeteria of my college campus to my dorm by this dude. This isn't normal. And I'm not going to repeat what my mom's doing. But let me get into another relationship and see how this works. Maybe this is what love is. But it's other components that I don't know about domestic violence because I've never been trained. I've seen the physical aspect, but now I'm in an emotionally abusive situation, financially controlling situation, and again, never putting all these together. This is what my mom is doing. You take all of this cycle, and here we are. Now I've graduated from college. I am now in corporate America. I am in the boardroom doing the thing. Successful. Success on the outside, inside failure, because I'm still dealing with these knuckleheaded guys and I am broken. And I don't know how to show I'm not broken because all I have is my job. And what happens is now I'm pouring out the negativity. I have an issue with males in authority because I see my, excuse me, I see my father and my job was on the line. And it's like, hold on. This is the best thing that I have going. I can't lose it. So that was my internal check. Something's not right. And I went to counseling for 9 years. And that is when I noticed the patterns of childhood trauma. Oh, this has impacted why I choose. I'm a bad picker. Yes, the guys are just as broken, but I'm thinking because they have trauma and I have trauma, we perfect for each other. That's just a trauma bond. And we are not going to get better. I can't fix you, but I can fix me. And it was through counseling that I learned how to uproot and end this cycle. Sorry, I went a little bit long, panelists. I apologize. But when you talk about the cycle, I lived that cycle and went through all of those phases. And until it takes that person to say, what's up with me? Tell yourself the truth. Assess what you're doing. When you talk to someone who's going to AA, the first thing is you have to admit you have a problem. Look at why you're doing. Is it taught? Is it learned? Is it learned behavior? Is it a problem? If it is a problem, acknowledge it. Assess the damage. Assess where you want to be and where you want to go, and make a plan and make it happen. That's how you even uproot that trauma. But don't just let cycles continue. And just because you were in a family, if you are the one in the family that sees that this is wrong and this should not be right, be the voice. Speak to your nieces and nephews. Be that ear. If no one else is, at least you can teach and train them that this isn't a normal cycle. This is not the right way to go about it and do it.
Tiffany, I would love to. I'm from Michigan too, Tiffany, Flint, Michigan, born and raised.
Hey.
I would love to hear about what your book is, maybe at the end. But I love that one thing, please don't apologize for telling your story. I think that is the most inspiring thing about us as human beings, to be able to tell our story in such a way that we get people's attention and they want to listen. And that's because the reason why I want to listen is because you're saying part of my story. It might not match up to yours 100%, but there are components that do match up. And speaking of that, you inspired me to talk more about my story and the reason why, even though it is learned behavior, but I grew up in a family of women who were abusive to me and were proud of it. One of the things that my great grandmother spread throughout our family is, if a man tries to hit you, to back in a corner and allow him to come to you, so that then all of your adrenaline is going to kick in and you're going to fight because you can't fight or just being shot. Like you don't have a choice now because you're in a corner, which we always hear that story about a mouse. When you put a mouse in the corner, they come out fighting. So this is the things that I grew up with in my family. And I come from an abusive mother who was very abusive, along with poverty and different things that were going on in her life. But then I found when I did get into a relationship that was emotionally abusive and that had some abusive traits to it, that it went back to my mother. Some of the things that I believed were love. And then we forget that component about love and why it's so hard for people to leave. Because now we see you with these black eyes, with this bruised lip, and that's all we see on the outside. We don't see your heart. We don't see that you care for this person, because before they gave you the black eyes and the bruises, the narcissistic behavior was that you were so charming, that you were my Prince Charming, that you were my everything. And so I didn't just throw that away with the black eye and the bruises. I'm still connected to that. So the lady, and I don't know her name, and I hate that because this happened in Dayton, Ohio, not too long ago. when she went to the Family Dollar, which is where she got killed in the parking lot, she was bringing him a plate of food. They had already broke up. She was in a full-fledged relationship, but she was bringing him a plate of food because it was some agreement that they made. That was the love that she still had for this person. So she didn't show up to get killed by somebody she actually fled from and was in a safe place, but she showed up because of the love. And we forget that, and we judge women, and we say you should be able to leave so easily. But think about your heartbreak when you had to lose a love. You know how you sat and cried in the room in the dark room, it was depressed, and didn't get off the couch. So love is not so easy to disconnect from. And we have to remember that when people are going through abuse, and not judge them, and not say, okay, I can't believe you showing up with a cast on your leg and your head, you know, where he did all this damage to you, and yet now you in court talking about don't put him in jail. Why would you do that? And then the system will say, I want to say, girl, bye. You don't need, we're going to give him probation because you sitting here fighting and saying you don't want him, you know, to go to jail. But that's not how we should look at trauma.
Yeah.
And I like to say, you know, I was doing a victims and survivors of domestic violence, had a group. And when we started the group, every woman in the group was still staying with their husband or boyfriend, or whatever. They were still staying there. But the boyfriends and husbands didn't know they were coming to a domestic violence group. So it was a code of silence because they didn't want them to know that at that point. Because a violent or abuser at home, knowing that a person, their girlfriend or wife, is going to a treatment program, they're going to be losing control. And they didn't want that to happen. So the ladies didn't tell them they were going to a group at all until later on. When they started getting their self-esteem, they felt more comfortable with them how to leave. They had to come up with a safety plan, an escape plan, and a protection plan. And we talked about all that. And then all of a sudden, after, you know, weeks went by, one of the ladies would say, you know, I left, I'm gone. And they would say, what, you did? Now they building up their self-esteem that feels as though, hey, they can get out and they can still survive. A lot of times, with domestic violence victims, their self-image goes down so low they feel as though nobody else is going to want them if they leave. So they're going to do everything they can to stay because they're not ready to leave yet.
Yeah, and that's a great point. One of the gaslighting techniques that the abusers use is that no one's going to want you. Who's going to want you after this? Who's going to do that? And then, you know, what Ms. Shalana had mentioned as well is about with the story, and thank you. But it is that power where it's like our stories, that is how you connect and that is how you educate this generation and this culture is through our stories, is showing like it's more common than you may think it is. And by communicating that, and when you talked about the love aspect, that's exactly what it was. My mom was married at 17 years old, and this is all the man she's known, and now she's at the end, towards the end of her 40s, and she didn't want to divorce him. Because she really did love him. And you know, I do talk about that in my story, is that's what made my home so like I couldn't understand it, because we had happy, high moments. But it was really like these domestic violence. She just wanted him to stop abusing her, and take all the other, like you said, the narcissistic characteristics of it. I just love me, like outside of the abuse and the charm, you know what I'm saying? The controlling tactics. So you hit it spot on. And someone had a question about addressing the shelters who prioritize physical over emotional. Should there be a split in the network to assist both sides of those spectrums? I totally agree that they should, because emotional abuse is just as damaging as physical. And I had someone say to me that a lot of the flyers that go around and a lot of the images show women with black eyes and show the abuse. And they said, I didn't reach out about domestic violence because I felt that I couldn't relate to that, because mine was emotional abuse. So I felt that it must not be this bad if I'm not being choked up or punched up. I can't relate to this image. So let me not take away from the ones who may really need it, and let me just suffer in silence. And there needs to be more agencies, there needs to be more community resources that speak up and say, just because you're not on this flyer, again, domestic violence is more than a black eye and more than physical, and we are here to support you regardless. So that is some of the change work that can be done.
Yes, ma'am. I want to take this moment to actually introduce our new guest, Ms. Sharon Moncrief. She's the executive director at Women of Refined Gold Incorporated. How are you tonight?
I'm good. Am I on different time zone than you all are? Because I'm on Central.
Yes.
Okay. I forget to ask that question.
It's okay.
Okay.
So we were actually just talking about, we were speaking on the cycles of, not the cycles, but things that pertain to the cycle of domestic violence. So would you care to enlighten us on how the threat of violence is an issue within domestic violence actually occurring?
Say it again. How the domestic violence is what now?
How the threat of actual violence is, how that attributes to the prevalence of domestic violence. Actually just being threatened with it. How does that how does that cause it to occur, so to speak?
One of the things I call myself an overcomer, but I am also an advocate. And I stayed in an abusive relationship for 17 years. I met my abuser when I was 13, so we pretty much grew up together. Okay. And one of the things that I realized when I came out of it, I've been out last month made 11 years. But what I realize is that a lot of the pieces that we overlook is a lot of times people look at domestic violence or the effects of it, or how we see relationships when it actually happens. But what I feel that because of my own experience, that we have to go back to the root of it. We always address the symptoms. We always address when it happens in that relationship, but very rarely do people address the root cause of it. And so what I mean by that is that the root cause of, you could have experienced an unhealthy relationship as a child with your parents, with someone in your neighborhood, someone at your church. And so a lot of times that kind of shapes your view of what relationships look like. And one of the things my mom asked me was, why did I stay so long? And at first I was like, I don't know. But then I realized, I told her I never saw a healthy relationship. Her and my dad was married. I never saw my dad put his hands on my mom. I never saw him raise his voice at her. And someone just said a lot of times, because it's not physical, we don't see the other signs of abuse. And it wasn't until I came out and started really searching my own self and really learning about domestic violence that I said, my dad never abused my mom. But what I realized was, because he didn't physically, but he was emotionally abusive to her. He was not faithful to her. So that caused her to deal with emotional and psychological abuse. But because it wasn't what we relate to domestic violence as the physical, I missed it. And so those were things I had to tell my mom, that I never saw a healthy relationship. My dad, he wasn't the emotional type. He didn't say, I love you, but we just kind of knew it. But I had this void that says, how does my dad really feel? I had my first child when I was 15 years old, and my dad said, what's his name and do he have a job? And so that left a void in me, that the things that I felt like my dad should have affirmed me with, I didn't get that. So when I got into this relationship, that's, I said, well, I had to figure it out on my own. And so because I didn't have this roadmap of what it looks like, what a healthy relationship looks like, this person is saying, I love you, and they're doing things that I guess subconsciously I needed from my dad, and I didn't get it. So I realized that for me is that we can't just look at the symptoms, and we can't just look at it when the situation actually happens. But we, a lot of time, have to go back and go to the root of it. Can go all the way back to our childhood in addressing domestic violence.
And a lot of times, before a person victim leaves, they have a plan, because the research says 75% of women who are killed by the batter abuser are murdered when they attempt to leave or after they have left an abusive relationship. So it is a kind of a whole plan that they have to have, how they leave, where they leave to, where they go, and all of that, rather than just saying, I'm leaving, but he's not going to let you go because he feels as though, hey, nobody's going to love him anymore. And if you're gone, hey, I might as well go too. I'll kill them both.
My story was different because I didn't have a plan at all. I just left my home, left all my stuff. I just left, and now when I look at stuff now, because the information that we have now, I didn't have a lot of this information. So one of my things I told people was that one of the things, fear did keep me there longer than I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And when I say 5 years before, when I said I'm gonna walk out, and because fear came in, my story is a little different, but it was like the devil was telling me, hey, you safer if you stay. Because if you leave, he may try to kill you. He may try to stalk you. He may try to whatever. So the fear of knowing that kept me there 5 years longer.
Yeah.
And so the last incident, I just said, you know what? I said, Lord, whatever has to happen is just going to happen, but I'm walking away. And I didn't even know what to expect. Was it scary? It was. But I do understand now that we definitely have to have a plan, because if something happened, and because I never really told anybody what I was going through. So if something could have happened to me, and people are not realizing, like when they see him, he's this funny person, and they don't see the person that I live with. And so I definitely agree. We have to have a plan. But for me, I had gotten desperate, and I just left everything, and I walked away, and I hadn't looked back in 11 years. But I know even in walking out, the key for me to be able to move forward was I had to really search, and I had to forgive. Because a lot of times when we don't forgive, it keeps us stuck in that place that we're trying to get out of. So for me, my coming out was very different. I don't think it was what people would usually say is how people come out, but mine was kind of like based on watching the movie One Night with the King. And when she went before the king, it wasn't supposed to, but she said, if I perish, let me perish, but I'm going anyway. And that was, I probably watched the movie a week or so before that, and that was the mindset I took on, like whatever has to happen, but I'm walking away. But I do advise that there needs to be a plan in place, because it is a very dangerous time when you're leaving.
So we actually just received a really good question from the audience. So could you guys touch on the cycles of violence in terms of isolation or seduction, isolation, threat of violence, apology, and threat to self-harm?
Well, I just wanted to bring one thing up that you mentioned that when I was doing a group, we say if a man or a abuser tells you, I can't live without you, what does that mean? You need to find out people need to find out what they mean by that, because they could mean, if you leave me, I'm going to kill myself and you. So when a person says, hey, I love you a whole lot, I can't live without you, I told my group, you need to find out what that means.
Okay.
In the cycle of isolation, it varies. I mean, and what the situation is. One of the key ones is like for me, my experience of growing up in a home with domestic violence is you felt like you were like my father was the terrorist and we were the prisoners of war. So you don't know what minefield you're going to walk on today to cause you can't be around. So for our home, it was my mom couldn't be around her whole family. When he was feeling nice and generous, maybe a couple years later, okay, you can go over here for this birthday party. Other than that, no, you can't talk to this person. You can't have friends. He only allowed her to have one friend in the whole marriage, which again, so isolation, because they only want to be the main voice in your head. And then Shalonda had touched on it earlier into the lady who just joined. I don't want to butcher your name. Can you say your name for me?
T. Sharon. T. Sharon.
Sharon. She mentioned about upping and leaving, right? That's how my mother, the first time she left my dad at 9 years old, she, with the clothes on her back, ran out the house, ran onto traffic, ran to a neighbor's house. We couldn't find them. Later on when we left, because again, she left 7 different times, leaving with the clothes on her back. And for the kid, you're traumatized because we just up and out, no plan, no strategy, none of our stuff, none of our belongings, and we're in these homes. And when you're isolated to just the family unit, and now you have to be around people that's not your family, children don't know how to interact with that. Like for me, I didn't know how to have, so that led to social issues. With just the connectivity of connecting with others in conversation, because we were only isolated to talk to just our core unit. So my siblings and my parents. And within the church sector, because again, dad is the preacher, dad's the pastor, you can't talk to nobody. Hey, how you doing? Keep it moving. And he's watching you in service. Like you have these blinders. If you think of blinders, he's watching you the entire service. So the isolation comes into church, where now you can't just look to the left, look right to your neighbor. You got to look straight ahead. Don't laugh. Don't show emotion. The control, again, the isolation, all of it is rooted in the power and control wheel. And all of that is to keep their voice the main voice. So whatever that cycle looks like, to keep their voice the main voice in your head, to manipulate and control, that's what they're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that a batterer abuser wants to do, is to isolate you. And because they feel as though your family hates me, your family wants you to leave. I know one of the people in my group, they went to another, person wanted to isolate them, so they took them to another country. And in another country, the victim couldn't speak the language. They didn't know about resources. They couldn't contact. He had the telephone, so she couldn't do anything. So she did everything he said for about 2 years. And she kind of talked him into, hey, let's go see my family. Everything's all right. Soon as she got off the plane, he never saw her again. That was it. So I'm just saying, isolation is really number one. They don't want you to be around friends or relatives that's going to try to talk you out of leaving. Absolutely.
And it goes kind of to the question or asked earlier about cultures that experience it. It kind of goes, when you talked about taking it to another country, some countries that's allowed, some religions that's allowed. So when it may not be abuse to them because this is what their native culture does. So you also have that added into it as well.
Right. And also when you think about isolation,
the abuse, not the other person, the victim decides what's abusive to them. The victim decides that.
And also when you think about isolation, they definitely don't want you to be around someone that's going to build you up and tell you, you're better than that. Because I know for me, I even just trying to go to school, and I hadn't graduated from high school and was trying to go to college, but they didn't even want me to go to school because, you're going to get an education and you're going to leave me. Or, you might meet someone on the campus. There are times I get out of class and he's walking around the campus with a book bag and, trying to act like, well, I came to pick you up or whatever. But you're recognizing, but they're trying to keep you isolated because they want to make sure you're not talking to people. They're going to make sure you're not trying to tell people what you're going through. And so the isolation becomes, for me, if I got to the point where I said, well, there's no need to go anywhere because all he's going to do is kind of keep calling my phone, asking stupid questions like, if my daughter was at home, where's the Pampers? You're there, just little things that they already know, but okay, she's not in my reach right now. I don't know who she's around right now. So I'm just going to keep calling and trying to find out where, is she really going where she says she is? Is she really around who she says she's around? Who's in the background. And so the isolation, sometimes you just get accustomed to being isolated because you don't want to go through the stress of having to explain so many things. And then the isolation of, because your self-esteem is broken down so much, you don't want anybody to know what you're going through, especially being an adult in a relationship. and people knowing you allow another person to treat you this way. And so you'll definitely isolate yourself because you don't want people to know what's going on. We did a fashion show one year, and our theme was silence no more. And so when we are silent, when we're isolated, then they know we're being silent. We're not talking. We're not telling anybody. And so isolation definitely can affect your mental status. But because I got to the point, I functioned, but I didn't function. I really wasn't aware of anything that was going on around me. I went to work, I went to school, I did things, but I had no concept. I would tell people I stay isolated so much. When I did leave the house and drive, I don't even know if I stopped at a red light because I'm just that disconnected from just where I am mentally. And so the isolation definitely, if you're exposed to it for a certain period of time, it affects you in more ways than people would ever understand.
And I wanted to say, going back to the question, just because, and I'm not trying to plug my company, the nonprofit that I work for, but the YWCA does deal with all aspects of abuse, including emotional, including physical, when that question was posed. So I just wanted to read off the power and control wheel saying, using isolation, controlling what she does, who she sees and talks to, what she reads, where she goes, limiting her outside involvement, using jealousy to justify actions. So speaking on the seduction and as well as the isolation, so it just doesn't start off as, I'm keeping you to myself. The seduction part of it is that you need me. So here's all the things I can give you. Like I can give you roses, I can give you jewelry, I can give you clothing, I can give you all these things in the beginning because I'm so charming and I'm such a good person. But also while I'm doing that, I'm saying things like, your mother never bought you a ring like this, or your cousin that you be hanging out with all the time, she jealous of you. Look how that ring shining. She don't have things like that I'm giving you. And then it's easier for me to isolate because now I'm doing this manipulation and building on this mental abuse that I'm offering you to give you the opportunity to not separate from the people who did support you. Because now I'm telling you things like they don't support you as much as you think they do. They're not there for you like I'm there for you. That's the seducing part. And then it becomes easier for me now to say, you going, when you say, yeah, I'm going over to my cousin's house. For what? The same one who did this to you? Now I'm bringing up, because when I did that, when I said that manipulative statement that your cousin's she's jealous of you, then you started talking and you started telling me, oh yeah, when we was 15, I remember how I had a boyfriend and she took my boyfriend from me. So I can use all of those things and all of that information to continue to manipulate you and make it easier for me to now isolate you from every situation because I'm using all the things you've given me to my advantage. And it makes it so easy, and no judgment on the person who is a victim, hopefully becoming a survivor, but this is the toxicity of it. And sometimes it seems so simple when it's not. It's a buildup. It's a buildup to get to that point where now I can easily say, you remember how your mom, you remember how your mom did you last week and how she talked to you. Why would you want to go over there? Those type of things, and especially in the younger community, those type of things are happening very easily because I want to look like I'm all you have. No one else can fit that bill.
Okay.
And it's like they prey on your dysfunction. They're preying on your dysfunctions.
We're actually within the last 45 minutes of our discussion, so we kind of want to talk about the solutions of it. So the first question I'll propose on that is, why does it seem as if the courts are in light of the abusers?
In my head, the James Brown song rang out. This is a man's world. But on top, outside of that, it's again, you also have that privilege. It depends on what the courts is. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in our justice system all across the board, and especially in what this is another area that it needs to be improved in, because again, like I talked about with even my mom, the re-victimization, she was re-traumatized through the court system, and until we can get courts, judges, lawyers who are trauma informed, that are truly knowing what this looks like and the depth, the true impact, and who aren't just in it for the dollar, or who are in it for the people, that is where the change is going to come from in the court system.
Mm-hmm.
Having documentation. One of the things as a child, as I got older, I knew I had to help my mom. I didn't know how, but I was watching Inspector Gadget. Okay. I was watching the Matlock shows and those little mini tape recorders. I started recording it. I started recording the abuse. I would take the Polaroids when I could and sneak a picture. Them things was loud because I almost got whooped a couple times, but try to take a picture of it. It wasn't because I was trying to take a picture of it to remember her like that, but I'm getting documentation. I'm building documentation. I'm building a case, because if one day that police get in, because they were called, neighbors were called, they never got in. They got in. I got documentation for my mom, documenting the calls, documenting the evidence, the email, set up an email where they don't have access to, set up a whole new email account. I'm leery about saying code words and things like that, because your abusers are also listening on these things as well, and they're taking notes. So the safety plan is most important as well. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, they have a DocuSafe app that they've been talking about, where you can safely secure documentation. I am a paper trail girl all day long, and I can say it was rooted from childhood. So when going to the courts, you got to have all your evidence. It's almost like you got to make yourself your own lawyer. Is it fair? No. But are you going to fight for you? Who has your best interest? You. So put all that documentation, all that paper trail, everything that you can to fight for you.
I think
I will say that with our organization, we focus on the 3 E's: educate the community, empower the survivors to end repeat victimization. And what I'm realizing is that the court system definitely needs to be educated on the mindsets of victims and or survivors. You know, a lot of time, if they haven't been through that, sometimes what they do is just their job. Sometimes they don't really understand what it feels like to go through abuse, or to grow up in a home, seeing your father being abusive, seeing your mother being abusive, or whoever that person was in your life. And so I think the court system, even the police officers, they definitely need to be more trauma informed. They also need to understand, you know, sometimes you can go out to a call 5 or 6 times, and at some point you just come to the point where, you know, I guess she like it, she keep going back, or she won't leave. But understanding is not that simple. So for me, as far as the court system as on the overhaul, they need to be more open to really understanding the mindsets of the victims and survivors. You know, investing in getting education, not only from people who work in it that may not have gone through it, but listening to those who have gone through it, who has come out of it. You know, understand, you know, why didn't I leave? You know, because there are underlying issues that may cause people to stay in those situations, and it's not because they like it. And so for me, with the court system, that they have to be, it's not about always going according to the law, because sometimes it's too many slap on the wrist. Okay, if I take them down, they're going to get right back out. And they're not taking it serious. I think now they're looking more, being more aware of domestic violence, and seeing that how many women are, you know, the number of women that are losing their life due to domestic violence, because hey, they just felt like, well, we was out there last week and here they go again. But really going to looking at every situation as if that was their first time encountering that person, because they don't know why that person hasn't left. And so the court system definitely needs to be educated as a whole, from the victims, from the people who are serving the victims, and not just feeling like, you know what, they keep going back. So, and they just become sensitive. They're not as sensitive to that person anymore, because at this point they're frustrated. They're tired of, I keep seeing you, you signing warrants and this and that. But I think they really need to be educated truly on the mindsets of the person who's going through it, because I think once they understand that piece of it, it will definitely allow them to look at how they treat domestic violence, how they, when people come in for courts and not being so lenient. And I'm not saying sometimes things are not maybe isolated in incidents, but when you see repeat things, and also, don't just feel like, well, they dropped the warrant, then, oh, well. No, really find out why are they not pursuing those warrants. Don't just throw them off to like, oh, we'll see them back in a couple of months. But really having enough empathy to get more involved and really to understand where that person is, and not just on the surface, and not just where they are right now, but really build a relationship with them to find out, what's really going on, so they are educated on it.
They have now domestic violence advocates that can help people, that let them know what they need to put together, let them know what they need, and help them through the whole court system. But you might have some judges that committed domestic violence, so they're going to see it their way, or you'll get somebody that has experienced it and knows what you're going through. So it all depends. There's a high statistics, high numbers for people of all different jobs, cultures, and everything else that have been involved in domestic violence and have been victims. And so just getting that kind of help, an advocate would be able to help you or a person get through the court system and what they need to do. That helps.
So what are some ways that we could actually go about as a community just preventing domestic violence? How could we do that as a community?
I think more awareness, I think, we got things out here, but we got to be more louder with our voices, coming together, not trying to do everything separate, but networking, collaborating, and partnering with other agencies that their focus is the same thing, to make our voices louder, not only for those who are still in it, but those who no longer have a voice. And so I do believe that the community awareness is going to be very key to doing that.
I think finding what young people like to do, whatever they like to do, before you get them in a whole group, and before they started playing basketball or whatever, and you talk to them about it. Because if you just want people to come and do it, they won't. So you got to have a hook that brings them in. Then you start talking about it. Whatever kind of hook it needs to be, and whatever type of population, women, young girls, guys, whatever. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
I see Shalonda was trying to go ahead. Go ahead, Shalonda.
Okay, he unmuted. Okay, because I was muted for a while. I think reaching out to young men at an early age, talking to our men more, thinking in the judicial system, because I just like the police system, I think needs to be revamped. I don't think a victim should even be in court. It's okay if they do want to write a letter about the abuser, but what about the women who, because time has passed by the time they go to court and by the time it goes to trial. And then a lot of times, just like I talked about earlier, the love aspect of these women kicks in, and they're the only person the abuser is calling from the jail cell. And by the time they make it to trial, the information that they put out is, can you please let them out? So I don't think that they should have the opportunity to even do that. I think that they should be in a separate system away from the abuser. So basically, the court system needs to be revamped. One of the things I thought about is, I remember watching TV and I saw Sean Connery. I don't know if everybody know who that is. He's an actor, American actor, European American actor. And he said, what's wrong with slapping a woman a little bit in the face, in the mouth? when she's doing too much talking. As if this is the culture of all of us here in America. So when you have a male-dominated system, you're going to have males who view abuse in a different way. So just to say that, just like the police system needs to be revamped, a lot of our systems we need to look at it. They need to be more trauma-informed care, just like everybody else said. So I won't touch on that again, but that's what needs to happen to make real change. And we need to start with the males. I think women have it. I'm not all women, but I think we're at the forefront of fights like this. And I think we need more men like yourselves with your group to speak about domestic violence, to talk about these issues, like you, Mr. Hicks. That's what we need.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely agree to all of the above. All of the above. And then going into these places where they are advocating, where, like he said, the kids are playing basketball. Where are the kids at? Let's go to these places and can we do a presentation? Can we talk to your youth? A lot of times we look at, but we just want to change the behavior modification, but we don't seek to understand what's happening in the background. We don't seek to understand why these actions cause these reactions, and mental health advocacy as well. Because again, these are learned behaviors, and in terms of uprooting it, they have to know that this is what it is and call it by name, right? And being able to go into even go into the churches, locking arms. People try to stay hands off with church and state and all of this. No, somebody needs to walk into these places and say, I want to do a presentation. I would like to. This is why this is important. Here's why if we show a unified front, that's the only way change is going to happen. And none of us can do it alone. We're equally better together. And it takes going into and being bold with your voice and your platform to do these things. One of the things that I did, even with marketing my book, was I did video trailers to show the life cycle of what happens when kids are exposed to domestic violence. This is what we're dealing with internally. And this is how this internal battle festers. You have to learn how to speak the language. And I hate to say it's marketing, but essentially it kind of is, because if no one is going to talk about it, you got to bring it to them in ways that they're going to understand it. You got to bring it to them, whether it's these stories collectively on where the stories are, and showing them how this can be you. If it's not you now, it could be, but until you're educated and aware, you won't know. So it takes the innovative ways to bring it in front of the audience and letting them know that a way that you can educate. Yes, it's a touchy subject, but it's not going to go away. And we're here to shine a light on these tough conversations in these dark places.
And if you all don't mind me saying, what you just said about being, creative, one of the things that we do every year, and it's one of our annual fundraisers, but it's an awareness, we educate through fashion. And so we do fashion shows. And so sometimes you may not get someone to show up at something that's just fully about domestic violence. But what we do is we educate through fashion. So we have survivors that are models, and some of them have never dressed up. We help to build their self-esteem, and that's the way we create a platform to educate the community about what it is and what it's not. And then we started something what we call was war purpose parties. And so we do skits, we have activities, and we help individuals that have a hard time having these conversations in the home, in the church, in the grocery store, as they encounter people. Through those purpose parties, we help people to learn how to facilitate those types of conversations. So you definitely have to be creative, because no one really wants people to know that they are in an abusive relationship or they have been in one. And so you have to take the focus off it, like, is this just about me? But if we make it a conversation, or we do it in ways that people can rate, like, hey, we have a good time, we do fashion, we have a speaker, but we don't just do it where people are feeling uncomfortable. And so those are ways that we've done to educate, and it's definitely open people up and say, hey, I've never shared this, but thank you for what you shared during your talking, or we may have the models just to have a sign or on a shirt, hey, I'm walking in proxy of my mother or myself, or, you know, someone that's lost their life. And so even without saying something, they're sending a message to people that, hey, no matter what, if you can help them, speak up and speak out, or if it's you, speak up and speak out. And we found that made it easier for them to be involved in the conversations, where they wouldn't necessarily have shown up to have that conversation.
So one of the questions asked about options for domestic violence under stay-at-home rules, like really quick. Honestly, so there's a download the Are You Safe app. Are You Safe? Free on Google, Apple. It's an app where it goes through safety planning. It takes people through the symptoms of, if you don't know if you are in it or if you know someone in it, it takes you through all of that, guided right at your fingertips. Identify the state coalition, either for them, let them know if they can't call. There's online chat options. They can safely exit the website so their website history isn't tracked. Being a safe space, again, listening to them, keeping their business confidential, identifying code words amongst yourself. Don't publish them on the internet, but identifying them so that you guys have that. So if they know that they need you to come swoop them out, or they need to leave out, they have those options. Making sure you're present, continually keep calling. If they're isolated, still call. Don't stop calling. Keep calling, even if they're not ready to leave. Continually to be a consistent present. Just keep it generic. Ask them how they feel. Keep asking open-ended questions. You can hear without hearing. You can know without knowing. Don't be judgmental. If there's anything you can do to help, if there's any bills, if there's kids in the homes, can I take the kids out? Can I take them to a park or a playground? Help with financial support, because again, financial abuse is really tight. Those are some of the things you can do to help people who are in domestic violence situations right now.
Okay. Anybody else care to add to that?
Just making sure that they have information. I see you keep flashing across the screen. Our number, which is YWCA 937-222-SAFE, which is 222-7233. So having those resources are important. It is sometimes hard for people to call, and they can also email us. You can go to ywcadayton.org in order to email us. So we try to get, our hotline is 24 hours. So we are able to be there for you in some type of way, whether it's safety planning or offering you shelter or offering you any assistance or resources. We're open 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
So why don't domestic violence victims leave their situation? Why do they stay for so long?
I feel like we talked a lot on that, but it's like when questions are like that are asked, it's also like, but why does the abuser abuse? And I think that's one way we help change the narrative on why do they stay so long? Because again, it's one of the most dangerous times to leave. And a lady in Pontiac, Michigan was just murdered a month ago, trying to leave her abuser. She let him know she was tired of it. She was ready to go. He let and was leaving. But again, like Shalonda said, she had so much love in her heart. All right, drop me off over my brother's house. She was gonna drop him off. This is gonna free me from you. Fine. I just want to be done. He point blank shot her in her hip, shot her in her head, left her there, called the police, walked himself into the police station and did it. And when the police asked, why did you do it? Because she said she was gonna leave me and she was serious. So when questions like that are asked, and I know you're moderating, so I hope you don't think it was like an attack, because it wasn't. But a lot of people ask that questions, and a lot of people say that, and I feel like that is one of the key components to drive change, is to change those type of questions. That narrative is, why do the abusers abuse? We put a lot of the onus, we put a lot of the responsibility on the victim when they didn't ask to be in these situations, because a lot of people, had they known and seen these red flags up front, they would have ran. So now that they're in it, now we're saying, well, why are you staying so long? They fear for their life. If children are involved, they fear for their children. We just talked about why the court system, how that's set up. Are the courts going to take them, or are the courts going to side with him? There's so much fear. Again, going back to that onion, there's so many layers of fear that are pulled back on while they stay, that if we can just change the conversation of how do we get them safe? Even if you're staying, how can I help you get safe? Whenever you're ready, I'm here to help you get safe and leave.
And I would say the three things I always say: fear, finances, and children are reason individuals stay. And the example I use, what makes sense to you may be a survival technique for someone that's in an abuse relationship. So if I had to make the decision to be homeless without no way to feed my kids, sometimes people may think, well, I'll just take it so my children will be safe, so my children will have somewhere to lay their heads. And so we have to think about those. And then you have to think about how was your life shaped growing up? A lot of time we're taught what goes on in the home stays in the home. So with that mentality, you're not likely going to tell anybody what's going on. You're going to stay there because if I leave, then people are going to ask questions like, why did you leave? What was going on? And a lot of women stay in there because sometimes with abuse, you don't have things that people can see. You have those are bruises that are hidden. And so you stay in a marriage because, you may have been taught, you just got to work it out. If you're a lot of time, if people are ministers and pastors, if I leave, then how that's going to look for that person. So it's so, like she said, it's so many dynamics that you really can't really answer why did a person stay, because it can be so many different reasons. But we do know, people, when your finances can control, you don't have assets, you're thinking about, well, how am I going to take care of myself? More like take care of children. So I guess I'll just have to do what I have to do. Or the fear that in a survivor or someone that's been abused have is very different from someone who's not in an abusive situation, because they can get out of the situation and still operate as if they're in that fear. They're still in fear mode. So it's a lot of dynamics, and that's one of those persons you're going to always ask, why did you? Some people have been out. What I realized, someone asked me after I came out of the relationship, when did you know you were in an abusive relationship? And I was like, wow. And no one ever asked me that. But my response was when I came out, and so sometimes not even recognize that you're in an abusive relationship also will keep you there longer. But there's no one definite answer. It's a lot.
And a person's self-esteem, a victim's self-esteem, or anybody's self-esteem, if they feel as though their self-esteem is so low, nobody's going to want them. They don't have the energy to leave. They feeling depressed. Now they have some mental health stuff going on. So they feel as though, hey, if I stay here, get killed, who cares? And so the self-esteem, the main thing is to possibly be able to provide them with some higher self-esteem, because if they're in a violent relationship or an abusive relationship, that's one of the things abuser wants to do. Lower your self-esteem, call you names, tell you can't do this, do everything they can to make you feel like if you leave, nobody's going to want you. So the self-esteem has a lot to do with it. And I mentioned before in the group, we have to help them with their self-esteem so they feel as though if they do leave, they will be able to leave and get out safely, and to be able to have somebody else, be with them if that's what they want. But self-esteem means a whole lot, because then when you get into the mental health issues, depression and other things.
Okay. Anybody else?
Oh, I do like what Tiffany said about looking at the abuser. In this country right now, what we're going through, we have a lot of people that say, why did they resist arrest? Or why did they just not give in? And then not looking at the person that's actually victimizing this person. I think in this country, we do a lot of that. And that's what we need to refocus and change the narrative, like Tiffany said, because You know, here it is. It's not a concrete, easy answer to that on why I stayed. There's so many, again, like the onion that Tiffany talked about. There's so many layers to that. But why aren't we looking at the abuser? Why are you abusing? Why are you out here hitting and physically and manipulating and isolating and seducing and doing all the things that you do when all I want to do is talk about and focus on the victim?
Okay. So we are within our last 15 minutes. If you guys would like to each make a closing statement and then, you know, give out your contact information that could possibly help anyone going through something right now.
I'll go. And basically, so Michael, thank you for those that have tuned in, that have listened. You're playing a big part in being a part of the conversation, because you are now being armed with taking away. You've now been commissioned to continue to drive these conversations in your circles and your platforms and your communities. It's not going to be an overnight fix, but the more of us who are continuing to talk about it and continuing to do this work it is important. It is so important. Women's lives are on the stake. Men's lives are on the stake. Like it is truly something that we collectively have to take up as a community, as a tribe. And definitely for me, my information is on the screen, how you can contact me, dovesnetwork.org. And we're a bridge. That is the whole point of the nonprofit, is to help with facilitating those healing resources and resources you may need. A lot of times, because again, my focus is specifically on childhood domestic violence, but you can't address the child without addressing the root of it, which is domestic violence. So we are passionate about going into churches and training leaders. A lot of churches want to dismiss this conversation because they don't know enough about it, which is fine. But it is not okay to not get trained. It is not okay to not lock arms with those who are doing the work. And so that is what we are passionate about. My book, Forgotten: Living in the Shadows of Domestic Violence, it chronicles my journey, an in-depth look on what a child who is locked arm in arm with their parents growing up in this type of environment looks like. And if you want to hear more about the child's journey, because again, we look at behavior modification, but it's a reason behind every decision. And until we start uprooting it and having these tough conversations and going after the healing through counseling as well, that is how we change the cycle and change the narrative. So thank you so much for your time. And I've enjoyed being on this panel with these amazing panelists as well.
Well, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me also. Just more conversation, as far as young people is concerned, any type of activities they want to get involved in. She was mentioned churches, activities, things like that. We got to talk about it more rather than it being the code of family by silence, the code of silence. We got to talk about it because it happens. And a lot of times, kids see, even the research says that if a kid sees one incident with their mom or dad or whatever in domestic violence, they come up with post-traumatic stress syndrome. They come up with that. And a lot of times when we see something like that happen in our household or whatever, or we're growing up, we keep that in our head for life. Sometimes it stays there. And we have a lot of things that we won't forget because it's been very traumatic. It takes up positive space, and positive thoughts won't fit in there. So we got to talk about it. We got to help people out with it. We got to say that, hey, this is going on. It's got to stop. Also, I wrote a book on the 11 building blocks of domestic violence prevention, and it's free. You can go online and read it or download it or whatever you want to do. But I think this was a great program, and thank you for inviting me, and let's do more of this kind of stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everything both of you guys said, Tiffany and Mr. Hicks. Again, the YWCA is 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. Our hotline the number is showing up, 937-222-SAFE, which is 937-222-7233. I think I am so thankful for, I've never done this before. This is my very first time. And I thoroughly enjoyed it and I learned so much. And we all have a voice. staying silent is no more. Like I said, there are so many ways in order to speak up, including if you go to that aunt's house and you see her, get pulled behind the doors, and then all of a sudden you hear noise, but you've been told not to say anything, and now it's time to not be silent. Now it's time to speak up when you hear it in a relationship, even if you're in the mall and you hear it in a relationship. I mean, you don't want to put the person in danger. You want to always keep them safe. But also, if you have the opportunity, that even means if you write a quick note, do you need help? And get the person to slip it to them. And just give them some awareness, because maybe they don't want your help at that time, but they'll never forget that a stranger took time out to write me a note to ask me, do I need help? So silence no more. I don't know if that's already a hashtag or a thing, but it's time for us to speak up, to speak out, to talk about our experiences, and to let people know it's okay. It's nothing wrong with you if you are in a toxic relationship. There's nothing wrong with you if you're going through this, but there are opportunities and resources for you to get the help.
Mm-hmm. And once again, I apologize for my timing, but I'm always excited about having these conversations, because I think having these conversations definitely helps those that are being impacted by to realize that people care, that people are having the conversations, and that they know that there's people that are out there working. One of the things I will say is that the hashtag silence no more, that was one of our things. We did that on our Facebook page, but we have to continue to say that silence no more. I think it's always important that we have to have great support systems when we're going through this, because sometimes it's not about anybody trying to convince you to leave, but just someone having that sounding board to talk to, because you can't make the person get out until they're ready to get out. But being a great support system, being able to listen, that is so needed for those who are struggling and to come out, or how to come out. I will say that worked for me, having someone I can call up and say, hey, I'm having a bad day. I just need to talk. I need you to pray with me. I'm having anxiety. Those were the things that helped me to get through what I was going through, and also to help me to come out and stay out. So we definitely need to keep these conversations going. We definitely need to get the community, get the, wherever we are, as many people involved in the conversations, because they may be dealing with something that they never even told anybody. Our organization is Women Are Refined Gold. We work with women as well as teens who have been impacted by dating violence. Our contact information is www.orginc.org, and our contact number is 334-877-7013. Because of things that's been going on, we can be reached at any time on that phone number, and just through Facebook. We have so many ways to get in contact with us if we need to reach out for help. And also, I forgot her name, the first lady who spoke, that is definitely, getting out and educating the business, the churches, how to have these conversations. If they don't know how to have them, be able to know the resources in the community available to refer the individuals to. But we definitely, they have to open their doors to get educated on things that they may face that they're not equipped to face. But definitely be open, especially churches, because that's where people go when they need something. They need healing. They're going through things. So definitely the church is the first place that we need to educate them on domestic violence.
Okay. Well, as I said earlier, if you want to support Knowledge for Life, you can do that by donating at knowforlife.org. That's no4life.org. And that will also take you to a link that'll be able to take you to our Patreon site if you want to donate to that too. And I just want to thank everybody on our behalf and as well as the behalf of the online audience and anybody that might be going through something right now with the quarantine and just like in general. I feel like this is a very productive conversation. It'll help somebody somewhere. So that's all we can hope for. And if no one has anything else to say, I wish you all a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
God bless.
God bless.